Stewart doesn't realize, but he's actually like the first guest for Beer with the Bra, right? It's a podcast that I want to start with. I sit down with people that love beer and have got so deeply engrossed in beer.
It's more than engrossed. It's this beer we're going to try here.
Yes.
I went down a rabbit hole.
Okay.
Right.
So we'll stop with it. But the aim of this conversation was Stewart being here is as the first unofficial guest was something that to see the growth of Stewart from just being a person like, yo, coming out for beer to the obsession that has become Stewart today is something absolutely sensational. So today we are going to be going through your beer that you have launched for Fools, right?
Yeah.
You entered it for the
I
competition.
entered for the homebrew competition.
First beer that you've ever entered for a beer competition, besides our local clubs though.
No, it's the first outside club competition I've ever entered.
Is it?
It's my third beer I've ever brewed.
Yeah.
So it's a collaboration and discussion with
a labor of love.
I've spoken to so many people. Through Byron, I've been in contact with Craig Clausen's from On Tap, Apiwe
from
Tolakazi. I had a chat with another chap, David. I've got a blank on his surname.
Yeah.
He's in Ghana.
Yeah.
And he's supposed to be a unusual grains specialist.
So you really went deep that you're speaking to people from different countries.
Yes. And but where my beer started when I mentioned to Rory from Eger that I want to make a sorghum beer, he said to, why don't I make a stout?
Yeah.
And I was very unsure as to how I was going to turn a stout into what I got. So I ended up using the Africa Cup rules and took 9 different recipes
and made it into one.
And made it in, sort of balanced everything out and made it into one. Mm-hmm. And then there was a recent article in On Tap magazine about brewing with sorghum.
Yeah.
And that all led me to coming down to this. So my majority, more than, in this case, 52% of my grains that I used for this beer is sorghum.
Right.
Which only a 20% of that sorghum grain, not 20% of the total sorghum grain was malted. And that's where I made an error.
Yeah.
Because then one of our club members posted an article, YouTube clip, and it talked about the amylases and the alphas and the betas.
Now this is where Stewart goes dark on us.
And figuring that out, and then talking to the chap in Ghana.
Yeah.
And he said, that's where I went wrong because my malts weren't malted.
Yeah.
Or my grains weren't malted. So, which then means you can't get your sugars out.
Yes.
And you need in the malting process, they start the germination of the seed, which then when the germination of the seed starts happening chromosomically or something like that, it starts breaking down the sugars it turns it into sugar that you can actually extract to make beer.
That's crazy.
So I'm still not completely clued up with it.
But you learned a lot from it, I guess.
So I'm learning.
Yeah.
So the nice thing about doing this is before doing this, I learned how to make sourdough bread.
Yes.
And so I've been a baker.
Yeah.
And turning baking into
brewing. Yeah.
I mean, the second beer you came to my house and you saw, because I was doing it in a mash tun.
Yeah.
And you saw all the steps and everything. With a system, it makes it easier.
Yeah.
Yes, it does make it easier. However, I think it was also my first brew on my new Grainfather system that I got second hand, but that was also chaos. But brewing that beer came out that I learned. It's all learning. It's all brand new. But luckily, because I've gone through baking and doing the whole sourdough process, I understand the steps.
Yeah.
So there's always and everything leads up to
process,
something. It's a process, and everything's process.
Yeah.
It's very process driven. And if you miss a step or you stuff up on a step, it can affect your final outcome.
Yeah. No matter how small.
No matter how small.
No matter how small, yeah.
If you don't sanitize enough.
Yeah.
Right? We've had
a clear case.
Yeah,
we're not going to go there. We won't talk about
that. It's happened.
Yeah.
We've had some very funky beers at our brew club because people don't sanitize enough. Beers that apparently, that I missed out in the last one, that taste of eucalyptus.
Which wasn't supposed to taste of eucalyptus.
No, I don't know where the eucalyptus flavor came from. But
it felt very medicinal drinking it though. Why? I don't know, but it did.
I'm glad I missed that one.
No, we're glad that you were sick.
Yes.
But nonetheless, Stewart is here today to try out this beer. It's currently being judged at Fools and Fans.
Yeah.
And 4 and 5 April, we'll figure out whether Stewart lifts the trophy or he's just another number as a contestant that entered. But don't you think, though, that at the end of the day, it was an experience knowing that you're entering it into a competition that made it even feel more, you were more driven to make something unique and something that's unknown. I mean, I've brewed some beers, but there's no way that I would have done anything like this.
Look, because it was completely using a new system, trying something totally different. My wife says to me,
"Hey, Vanessa."
My wife says to me, "Never, if this is what brewing is going to be like." She doesn't want me to brew because I was so stressed because
well, clearly I know what's
recently, I think On Tap had a list of lead up homebrewers. Lead up to what happens when you're entering a competition and all the stresses involved in making sure it's ready. And I was very worried about temperature control, trying to make sure it was fermented enough. At that stage, I hadn't figured out the amylases, which I realized. So I hadn't figured out that it was basically my fermentation had already finished. With all that, then life. Leaving home at 6 o'clock in the morning, getting home at 6 o'clock at night, and still brewing on top of that. It's chaos.
No, I think it actually stressed you out more knowing that it's for a competition.
Very big time. This beer.
So what's the name of the beer?
The name of this beer is Amazimba Ubisi Stout 3.0. Reason it's Amazimba Ubisi. There we go. The reason why it's Amazimba Ubisi is I entered the African competition. I initially tried using the Zulu names for sorghum milk. If you direct translation, it's more entitled to be used as black breast or black breasts. And in doing so, I decided I couldn't use that because when I mentioned the name to my colleagues at work,
they were on the floor.
They were on the floor pissing themselves. Saying, "No, Warren, you can't use that, right? You can't use that because it's."
It comes across as being a little bit inappropriate.
It comes across as inappropriate. So then I found that the Kosa derivative of sorghum milk doesn't come across as inappropriate. So I decided to go
keep it safe.
Okay. It's an African stout. I've entered it as a experimental beer, 34C on the BJCP list because although it's a stout, it doesn't actually fall in the stout category because of what I did with it.
But that now saying in that is that, of course, now because it's experimental, you have to give more description on the explanation of the beer.
Instead of just saying it was brewed with this, I literally listed percentages of my grains. Explained it's my third beer. Explained it was my first brewing in my new system. Then you go because I had to have, if you're using sorghum and you had to have 30% sorghum, millet. I think sorghum and millet are the same thing, but I'm not quite sure. But
question it.
I'm not going to question it. And maize, those were the three. I'm assuming any other grains that are commercially available in South Africa. And if your malts, your majority of your malts had to be SAB malts.
Yes.
Your pale malt had to be SAB malt. And then you had to use commercially available hops.
Yes.
Not imported hops. So it had to be, so the
emphasis is make your beer as local as possible.
As local as possible.
Yeah.
And then you could use any specialty grain you could. So mine's got Carafe Type 3, Cara Aroma, chocolate malt.
I'm so proud of Stewart.
Pale malt.
Listen to him talk, it's like,
flake barley.
Yeah.
I couldn't get roasted barley, so I had to up some of my other grains
to compensate for it.
Then rolled oats, and we had in the cupboard steel cut oats, right?
So why? Well, the moment came for it.
Vanessa at one stage was on a health kick, and she tried steel cut oats, and she didn't like it.
Yeah.
But 200 grams of that went into the beer. And to try and compensate for the sorghum, because the sorghum, when you, it's got a different gelatizing temperature. So if you do it at your normal mashing temperature between 63 and 67 or 73, you can't get all the sugars out of it. You've got to put it in boiling water, and in putting in boiling water, and I also put it on my list. I should have, when my water was boiling, I should have switched off my pot, because I had it on a stainless steel pot on a gas. I should have switched it off straight away, but I didn't. And I put it in 2 batches, because I mixed the sorghum with rice hulls. I should have added more rice hulls, but I didn't.
No, but that's what that's the aim of home brewing. You're learning,
Threw it in, and then got my next batch. And as I got the next batch, I could smell that it scorched already at the bottom.
Yeah.
So that caught at the bottom.
So it had a little bit of a burnt smell to it.
Little burnt smell in my 20 liters of boiling water and my sorghum, and that I add with my rice hulls.
Yeah.
I used 2 different kinds of sorghum that I could get. One I bought at Macro, one I bought at Pick and Pay.
Yeah.
I should have just bought the stuff at Pick and Pay, because that was malted.
Yeah.
The guy Davids, he sent me a link to a Umajoya Brewers sorghum that you can only get in.
Yeah.
I've Googled and I've found it. I've only found it in 3 ShopRites.
Yeah.
In Gauteng. So I maybe should have asked you when you came back. But 6 kilograms might have taken up your weight in your bag on the plane when you came home.
Put it to the check-in. Oh, you just take it.
But anyway, so I've now figured that out, and speaking to Apiwe. Sorry, Apiwe.
Blanked out there.
Apiwe said the one grain I used, which was supposed to be coarse sorghum, which was my majority of my stuff, was milled too fine.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting a stuck mash in the end. It took, after my run through,
the poop came about.
No. After my run through in my grainfather, after I transferred everything over, my run through in my grainfather, then I had to sparge. I sparged with 9 liters of water.
Yeah.
And that took 2.5 hours to get all the liquid
to drain through.
2.5
hours.
2.5 hours.
Through how many kgs?
I had 5, 6, 7, about 9.5 kilograms of stuff. But the problem comes with the sorghum, because it was so fine, it turns to porridge.
Yes. Thick porridge.
It's a thick porridge. So that's where I got my stuck mash from.
Yeah.
So now I know what a stuck mash is. And also,
so you've learned the good and bad so far, yeah.
Also learned, because of this, I had a lot of sediment in my beer. In trying it, when I've got myself a hay brew fermenter.
Yeah.
And it's got 2 taps, a top and a bottom tap, right at the bottom of your fermenter. I'm taking some out. I was constantly getting the sediment in the bottom. And then somebody said, I can't remember who said to me, why don't I try gelatin?
Yes.
Right. And so I then, just before bottling, I managed to get my my final fermented wort down to, I think it was sitting at 16 degrees.
Yeah.
Then I added 8 grams of gelatin with boiled water. I'd made sure everything was sterile first, and I added the gelatin in and stirred it in with a sanitized spoon.
Yeah.
And then I waited sort of half an hour
to see what happens. Yeah.
And
everything settled.
All the majority of the sediment settled out. I've got 1 or 2 bottles that I had towards the end that it still had stuff in it.
Yeah.
Out of the bottom tap of my fermenter, I managed myself and Leon, another guy on my brew club.
Yeah, Leon.
We call it. Sorry about that. We call it the turd, right?
Yeah.
Because the bottom tap, when you open it up, just your thick yeast and any
sediment. Yeah.
It's a conical fermenter, so everything drains out the bottom, and then it basically a turd comes out. It looks a bit like a turd. And mine,
a proper turd,
proper turd, and mine came out. I got a lot of that out. That took about 2.5 liters of liquid, and the yeast and everything out. And then once I'd done that, then I started going from my top tap. And crumbs, I forget how many bottles I had. I think I had 42 bottles. 16 of them are 660 and 750 ml bottles. And if this beer is drinkable, a case of that is going.
So you're telling me we're trying this for the first time?
Yes,
You've never tasted this before.
I've tasted samples. Here we go. Guinea. Times 2.
Oh,
what I said today.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, so 6. I'm taking a case of this to Fools.
Yeah.
As a donation beer from Honest to Brew.
Yeah.
And apparently I've got to man this. If it's drinkable, and we're trying it as a club on Thursday. So yes, why are you scared, Byron?
I feel honored, but highly fearful at the same time. So take it away, buddy.
Let's do this. Let's see what happens. Looks like a beer. Pours like a beer.
It's got a head like a beer.
It's got a head like a beer.
It's a nice head retention now.
It's.
There you have it.
I used my.
I can tell you something though. My beer that I entered for Fools doesn't smell like this.
Well, we also learned. I couldn't because I'm making a stout. I couldn't use Southern Passion as my hops.
Yeah.
So I used. Doesn't smell too bad. Why are you sniffing and you're going there? Cheers.
Well done. I'm really proud of how far you've come though, but let's try this out and
see if it kills us.
It's nice knowing you all. Cheers.
I love you too, Bert. That's drinkable.
It's not as bad as I was worried about. There's still a sharpness to it. You should, just off the bat, I can already tell you, this needs to stand for a bit. So make sure that you bottle or put some away for storage. Give it 6 months. The beer that I entered for the Fools competition as well. Did you add melanoid into it as well?
I added lactose.
Yeah. Because can you taste now like your palate becomes a bit more sour?
I added lactose to it. And I used...
So what's the ABV on this?
Before bottling, it was 3.6.
Yeah.
In speaking to Hein today, bought him at the shops, he said it normally goes up with your bottling, and because I don't have a kegging system, so it pushes up the ABV by 0.5. So there should be a 4.1.
We can taste it.
They're drinkable.
You're doubting yourself.
When have you known me not to doubt myself?
Because it's good. It's not as terrible as. I'm not gonna lie. You beat me on this one, dude. That's fact.
Hey, I beat you in the last competition too.
Oh,
Oh, that you were so salty.
Please.
Oh,
Hot wings, Jay.
Hey.
It's drinkable.
Mm. Mm.
Okay, let's.
I want to see if there's anything left in the bottom.
Yep.
There is, yeah. It's got a nice mouthfeel, right?
But what? So what could this be at the bottom?
Okay, that could be that at the bottom. You'll see there was a lot of
see how it's coming down.
There was a lot of because of the one type of sorghum I used.
Yeah.
It was so fine.
Oh, so it filtered through everything.
When I was taking it because I was taking to Charlie's to check it on his little scope jobby.
Yeah.
To get because to work with a to work with
you use the refractometer. Yeah.
Use the refractometer, but to use your tube with your
OG and FGs.
Your OGs, FGs, that's the stuff. That uses about 150 mils of liquid.
Liquid, yeah.
And I didn't want to keep on taking 150 mils liquid. So I would pop down to Charlie's. Shout out to Charlie. Thank you for the using of your refractometer.
But now, so you need to get
with the wrap pull. If you get a wrap pull and you drop it in, it actually on the app it tells you what your gravity is, what your temperature is, what your
on a graph.
Is it like a graph?
Full detail,
yeah. Full detail, and it looks so cool. But to me, it makes a lot more sense.
Yes.
Right? But I've either got to decide: do I go the wrap?
Do I cut my leg off? Do I cut my arm off?
No. Actually, it's on special at the moment. Yeah. Somewhere it's 799 rand, which is not too bad, right? Considering the fact I paid $5,000 for my whole brewing system.
You don't not speak of those things.
We will not speak of those things. But I've also realized temperature control is very important.
Yeah.
So I need to find myself ideally a double door display fridge, one of these bigger, wider fridges that I can set up, because I went and purchased with this whole thing. I ended up purchasing a controller, the STC 1000 controller that controls your cooling and your heating. And with that, then I can set it up onto the fridge, so I can have a better control of my environment.
Yeah.
Because what I did this time is my fermenter's got a chilling coil. And I used, luckily I've got a contact and I managed to get cooler boxes of ice.
Yeah.
And I used 14 cooler boxes of ice through my fermentation process to try and keep my temperatures low. Constant. But I couldn't keep it constant at 16 degrees or 18 degrees.
So did that mean you had to wake up like in the middle of the night and change ice?
No, I didn't.
You just went with it?
Went with it. I froze 2-liter containers in my chest freezer in the garage, and those went in the morning, in the afternoon on the way past where I picked up the ice. I got a thing of ice, and they came home and they took out water, added ice. So my temperatures yo-yoed a bit.
So in saying that now, from the time you put on your system until we drink this beer now, how long did it take you?
Okay, I bottled on the 16th of February. And how
long was fermentation?
It was about fermentation was about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks, right? But because of my stuck mash, I decided to brew on the Sunday.
Yeah.
And because of my stuck mash, and also with sorghum, your boil needs to be 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Because if you don't boil it for 90 minutes, I forget the term, it's some technical term. It's grass, because sorghum is actually a grass.
Yeah.
and you need to boil off that element. So you have to boil for 90 minutes. So on day 1, I boiled for 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then day 2...
Why did you split it up?
Because of the 2.5 hours of stuck mash and using a brand new system and scorching the bottom of my pot and getting my porridge, right? That was where most of my water was, my porridge into my basket in my grandfather. It was 2 o'clock in the morning when I had to go.
Yes.
At 6:15 in the morning, I have to leave the house to take, or 6:10 actually, got to leave the house to take my child to college in Claremont. So I decided to stuff that 2 o'clock in the morning, shut down. I decided about 1 o'clock, shutting down everything, cleaned up as best I could, sealed up my
best as you could,
fermenter. Oh, not fermenter, my grandfather with cling film, so nothing could get into it.
Even though sanitize.
Even though it's got a lid, I covered everything. I sealed off everything.
So nothing got in there.
Nothing got in.
But you can taste that there's no infection or anything. You don't taste any of that. So you did well in that regard.
It was a mission and a half.
Yeah.
I've learned a hell of a lot. I want to try something a little bit easier the next time.
Yes, like a smash.
Not huge. Sometimes smashes work and sometimes they don't, right? So it's now all what I'm going to brew next. I'm thinking about doing a Scottish ale. I found a recipe, a 19-liter recipe, so it's a lot smaller.
You can control it a little bit better.
Control it a bit easier.
Yeah.
It's just...
But in that same question, actually, what inspired you to do this beer?
Well,
was it because of the parameters of the competition?
I heard about African Cup, and the first thing I read, it had to be sorghum, maize. And maize tends to go towards you making a umkomboti type thing. But that's a sour.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to make a sour. And I ran in one Sunday. I ran into Rory from Eiger at Woolworths. And I said, sorry, Rory, I'm sorry to bother you.
Never mind. Okay.
Never mind that you're doing your shopping and I'm doing my shopping. So I've got a question to ask you.
Yeah.
And I've noticed with brewers, right? I had a chat to Charlie about this beer. Charlie wants a bottle. Right? And I promised him a bottle so he can decide if he likes it or not and how he wants to tinker with it because he's done that before.
Yeah.
And when I spoke to Rory looked at me and said, why don't I go Sorghum Stout?
Yeah.
So the idea was Sorghum Stout stuck in my mind.
Yeah.
I blame Rory.
Okay.
Rory, your fault. Right? But then going through the whole process to try and get a stout, I now found out from, I forget David's surname, the guy in Ghana.
Yeah.
He gets his unmalted sorghum. And he's got a farmer outside of Accra where he stays, that's got a peanut roaster.
So he roasts his malt through that.
And he roasts his sorghum in the peanut roaster. And it comes out very black. Some of it almost pops like popcorn.
Yeah.
Right? But he says it's variable. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not so great.
So it's not a consistent.
It's not a consistent thing. But he gets the roasted toasty stuff. And because he brews with strange grains, and he uses yams, and he's given me.
I love that though. I love when people experiment.
He's got a whole list of other stuff he uses. Yams, sweet potatoes, crumbs, a whole bunch of other stuff he uses. And he says, then he had, because of the because you don't have your amylases, amylases come from your malted grains. Then he adds amylases to the beer, which you can buy. The alpha amylase is the one that gives you more your mouthfeel. It does give you a bit of fermentable sugars, but it's more your mouthfeel. Your beta amylase gives you your fermentable sugars.
I'm fascinated, Stewart, how you've engrossed yourself into this, and I appreciate that so much that it blows my mind. I'm like, I love it. I love every aspect of it. That you're a friend of mine, and I'm like, I got a knowledge base now that I never thought I would have. But it's aspects like that. I think that You talk about homebrewers. When I was in Pretoria now the other day, I met Julian, right? And you talk about how growth happens over time. Is that he said he brewed his first beer. By the time he did his third beer, like you're doing your third beer, he bought a brewery. That's how the obsession grew for him. And I find like with you also, from somebody that had, I mean, we did our first beer in my garage in a pot, and it was a hot mess that day. But to see what you've done now, you've made a beer that's again drinkable. And where next? Besides the Scottish ale?
No clue. I have no cooking clue where this is going to go. All I want to do is be able to, like I told you way back, my second beer that I brewed.
Yeah.
Not going to rub it in you, but my second beer that I brewed, that I've still got a couple of bottles left.
Yeah.
Right? Not much. I got 14 liters, just under 14 liters of beer out of that brew. The beer came out at 6.3% ABV, or 6.13% ABV. That was where it came out. And it was a good beer.
Yeah.
And I ignored the costs of the electricity and the petrol to go get the water. And shout out to Charlie for telling me where to get the good water.
Right? I know too.
Right?
Yeah.
And
things we do not speak of. Yeah.
Things we do not speak of. I had to write it in on my where you got your water from on the entry form. Now people will know. And with forgetting all the other costs, I worked on what my direct costs and stuff I purchased, my grains.
Yeah.
14 liters cost me 440 rand.
Okay.
At that point, the cheapest you could buy beer, not so much anymore, Castle Light was on special for 389 rand for a case.
Yeah.
And Castle Light's 4%.
4%.
Yeah. That gives you 9.28 liters of beer for 390 rand. I paid 440 rand. I got a 6.13% ABV beer that was far more drinkable and better to drink.
This is the clincher.
Right? Yeah. So I'm going, it makes sense to me if you follow your steps and your processes properly. Yeah. You sanitize to make sure you get it. Yeah. You don't get any kombucha vibes or any or any other strange cuck in your beer. Although one or two people have brought a sour beer's gone sour and actually
not intended to go sour.
Not intended to go sour,
let's
but
get that straight.
Not intended to go sour, but they've still been drinkable. But other people have brought us beers that I wouldn't want to wash my windows with it because it will melt the glass.
Yes.
So if you
bang for buck.
You bang for buck. Yeah. If you do it properly and things work out, then you'll get a beer that you can drink.
And that you want.
And that I want. Yeah. That's cheaper than I can buy in the bottle store.
And for that, you'll keep forever brewing.
I will keep on brewing.
Well, there you have it, everybody. That's Stewart. Stewart, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. First, beer with the bra.
Beer with the bra.
Stewart. Anyway, to all of you, stay happy. Peace.
Bye.